They say Frank Sinatra died on May 14th, 1998. The history books will tell you that his heart finally gave out in his Los Angeles home, surrounded by family fading from age and illness. The obituaries listed his albums, his movies, his Grammys, his Oscar, and his legendary voice. They spoke of a long life well lived. But his friends knew the truth. They knew that the man who died in 1998 was just a shell, a ghost haunting a body that had forgotten how to live. The real Frank Sinatra, the man who sang, the man who loved with an intensity that burned like fire, the man who lit up every stage he touched, actually died 8 years earlier in a London hospital room he would never see. He died on January 25th, 1990, the day a telephone call brought him to his knees and ripped the soul right out of his chest. Because on that day, the chairman of the board didn't lose his fame. He didn't lose his money, and he didn't lose his voice. He lost her. He lost Ava. And when he lost Ava Gardner, he lost the only woman he had ever truly loved, the only woman who had ever truly owned him. This is the heartbreaking, untold story of the night the music stopped forever. This is the story of a man's silent scream that echoed for 8 long years until he finally found his way back to her. To understand the magnitude of the tragedy that destroyed Frank Sinatra, you first have to understand the bond he shared with Ava Gardner. It wasn't a normal love, it wasn't healthy, it wasn't peaceful, it was obsession, it was passion, it was destruction. Frank met Ava in 1949 at a party in Palm Springs. The moment he saw her, everything else, his wife, his 3 children, his career, his sanity, became secondary. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Green eyes, dark hair, a face that could stop your heart, and she destroyed him. Beautifully, completely. Their relationship was volcanic. They fought in restaurants, throwing wine glasses and screaming at each other until management threw them out. They threw dishes at hotel walls. Security guards in every major city knew them by name. Mr. Sinatra and Miss Gardner are fighting again. Ava would call Frank at 3 a.m. drunk on vodka and cruelty. I love you, Francis. You're the only man I'll ever love, but I hate you. I hate that I love you. Then she'd hang up and disappear. Wouldn't answer his calls for a week. Frank would sit by the phone like a lovesick teenager, smoking cigarettes, going insane. She'd fly to Spain to film a movie, and Frank would follow her across the ocean like a lost dog. He'd show up on set, and she'd either fall into his arms or tell him to go to hell. He never knew which version of Ava he'd get. Their friends tried to warn them. This isn't love. This is destruction. You're killing each other. But Frank didn't care. If loving Ava kills me, then I'll die happy. And he nearly did. In 1953, Ava flew to Africa to film Mogambo with Clark Gable. Frank, terrified she'd have an affair, followed her. But he had nothing to do there. He wasn't in the movie, wasn't working, just sitting in a tent in the middle of nowhere, slowly losing his mind with jealousy. The isolation, the heat, the constant fighting, it broke him. One night, Frank sat in his tent with a pistol, seriously considered ending it all. The pain of loving Ava Gardner was too much to bear. Ava found him, saw the gun, they fought. She left, he stayed. That's who they were. 2 people who loved each other so much they nearly destroyed each other. Being with Ava Gardner was like being addicted to something that was killing you. You knew it was wrong. You knew you should stop. You knew it was ruining your life. But you couldn't, because nothing else felt real anymore. Food had no taste. Music had no color. The world was gray without her. Frank left his wife Nancy and their 3 children for Ava. The press destroyed him. Sinatra abandons family for homewrecker. The Catholic Church condemned him. His mother stopped speaking to him. His career collapsed. His voice failed him, literally failed. In 1952, he couldn't hit notes he'd been singing his whole life. Vocal cord hemorrhaging. Doctors said the stress was killing his voice. Columbia Records dropped him. He couldn't get arrested in Hollywood. Movie studios wouldn't touch him. Radio stations stopped playing his records. Frank Sinatra, the biggest star of the 1940s, was washed up by 1952. 36 years old and finished, but he didn't care. He had Ava. They married in 1951, November 7th, Philadelphia. It should have been the happiest day of Frank's life. Instead, it was the beginning of 6 years of beautiful hell. The marriage was doomed from the start. Ava was a free spirit who couldn't be tamed. Frank was a possessive Italian who needed to own what he loved. She'd go out dancing with friends. He'd accuse her of cheating. She'd actually cheat just to punish him for accusing her. He'd find out. They'd fight. They'd break up. They'd get back together. It was a cycle of passion and violence that couldn't sustain itself. In 1953, Ava got pregnant. Frank was ecstatic. Maybe a baby would fix them. Maybe a baby would make her stay. But Ava didn't want children. Not then. Maybe not ever. She had a career. She had freedom, and she wasn't ready to give that up. She had an abortion. Didn't tell Frank until after. When he found out, it destroyed him. Not because he was angry, though he was, but because he realized that Ava would never be the wife he wanted her to be. She would never settle down, never be content, never be his. The fights got worse. In 1957, Ava left him, for good, or so everyone thought. But here's the thing about Frank and Ava, they never really let go. Not truly. Even after the divorce, even after she moved to London and Spain, and even after Frank married 2 more women, Ava was always there. In the empty space beside him, in the songs he sang, in the Jack Daniels he drank alone at 2 a.m., in my solitary, I'm a fool to want you, one for my baby. Every Heartbreak song Frank ever sang was about Ava. Everyone knew it. Frank didn't even try to hide it. His 3rd wife, Mia Farrow, knew she was competing with a ghost. His 4th wife, Barbara, knew she would never be Ava. Nobody could be Ava. Frank would call Ava late at night from hotel rooms in Vegas. They'd talk for hours. Sometimes they'd fight. Sometimes they'd just breathe on the phone, neither one wanting to hang up first. When Ava got sick in the 1980s, stroke, pneumonia, her health declining, Frank sent money. He paid her medical bills, her rent, her expenses. She was too proud to ask, so he just did it, anonymously when he could, directly when he had to. Take care of her, he told his lawyer. Whatever she needs. I don't care what it costs. His wife Barbara knew. His kids knew. Everyone knew that Ava Gardner owned Frank Sinatra's heart, and she would own it until one of them died. January 25th, 1990 started like any other Thursday in Los Angeles. Frank was 74 years old. His health was declining, memory problems, small strokes. But he was still Frank, still sharp when he wanted to be, still singing occasionally, still the legend. He was at home in Beverly Hills. The phone rang around 3 p.m. His assistant answered. The voice on the other end was shaking. Is Mr. Sinatra available? It's about Ava. Frank took the phone. He knew. Somehow, before the words were even said, he knew. Mr. Sinatra, I'm calling from London. I'm very sorry to tell you that Miss Gardner passed away this morning. Pneumonia. She went peacefully. The phone slipped from Frank's hand. He didn't drop it. It just slipped, as if his fingers had forgotten how to work. His assistant picked it up, spoke to the person on the other end, got details. Frank just stood there. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. Not yet. He walked to his bedroom, sat on the edge of his bed, and stared at nothing. Barbara found him there an hour later. Frank, honey, are you okay? He looked at her with eyes that were completely empty. She's gone. Who's gone? Ava, she died. Barbara sat next to him. She knew this moment had been coming. She'd known for 30 years that when Ava died, something in Frank would die too. I'm so sorry, Frank. He didn't respond, just kept staring. That night, Frank didn't sleep. He sat in his chair, the same chair he'd sat in for 40 years, and he went through old photo albums, pictures of Ava from the 1950s, her in a swimsuit on a beach, her laughing at some joke, her looking at the camera with those eyes that could make you forget your own name. He found a letter she'd written him in 1952. He'd kept it all these years. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but he could still read it. Francis, you're an idiot, and I hate you, and I love you, and I don't know why I can't quit you. Love, Ava. He read it over and over until the sun came up. The funeral was in North Carolina, where Ava had been born. Frank wanted to go. His doctor said no. Frank, you're not strong enough for the flight. The stress could kill you. Frank didn't care. I have to be there. I have to say goodbye. But his family intervened. His children, his wife, his doctor, they all convinced him that he couldn't make the trip. It would literally kill him. So Frank stayed home while Ava was buried without him. That broke something inside him that would never heal. He watched the funeral on the news, saw the casket, saw the flowers, saw people he didn't know standing around the grave of the only woman he'd ever really loved, and he wasn't there. He felt like a coward, like he'd failed her one last time. After the funeral, Frank retreated into himself. He stopped performing, just stopped. No more concerts, no more recordings. He was done. Friends would call, trying to get him out of the house. Frank, let's grab dinner. Let's play some golf. Not today, pal. I'm tired. He was always tired now. Dean Martin understood. Dean had lost his son 3 years earlier and was going through his own hell. He'd call Frank and they'd sit on the phone in silence, two broken men who didn't need words. You okay, Frank? No. You? No. Okay. Talk to you tomorrow. That was their friendship now. Shared grief, shared silence. Frank established a routine and he stuck to it with religious precision. Every evening at 7 p.m. he would dress for dinner, always in in a nice suit or a tuxedo, navy blue, charcoal gray, sometimes black, always with a crisp white shirt, always with the tie perfectly knotted. He'd been tying ties since he was 16 and his fingers remembered even when his brain didn't. His valet would help him with the jacket. Frank's hands shook now. Small strokes had taken their toll. "You look very sharp, Mr. Sinatra." "Thanks, pal." Then he'd go downstairs, get into the car. He couldn't drive anymore, and his driver would take him to his favorite Italian restaurant, Patsy's, usually, or La Dolce Vita, places that had been serving him for 40 years. The owner would greet him at the door. "Mr. Sinatra, your table is ready." "Thanks, Sal. Is she here yet?" Sal would pause, play along. "Not yet, Mr. Sinatra, but I'm sure she'll be here soon." Frank would nod. "Good, I'll wait." And he would sit at his usual table, the one in the back corner where he could see the whole room, where nobody could sneak up on him. Old Vegas habits. The waiter would appear. "Good evening, Mr. Sinatra." "The usual?" "Yeah, and set another place. She's running late, but she'll be here." The waiter knew not to ask. He'd bring 2 menus, 2 sets of silverware, 2 wine glasses. Frank would order for 2. Veal Parmigiana for himself. He'd been eating it since he was a kid in Hoboken. Linguine with clam sauce for the empty chair. Ava's favorite. Or it had been back in 1952 when they still went to restaurants without destroying them. The food would arrive. Frank would eat slowly, occasionally glancing at the untouched plate across from him. Sometimes he'd talk quietly, so nearby tables couldn't hear, just murmuring to the empty chair. "You look beautiful tonight, baby." "Yeah, I know I always say that because it's always true." Pause, as if listening. "The weather?" "Yeah, it's nice. Warm. You'd like it. Remember that restaurant in Madrid? The one where we threw the paella at each other?" He'd chuckle. "Yeah, good times." The waiter would refill his wine. Frank would nod thanks, then turn back to the empty chair. "I saw Nancy today, your goddaughter. She asked about you. I told her you're doing fine. You are doing fine, right?" Silence. "Good, that's good." He would sit there for hours, 2 hours, sometimes 3, eating slowly, sipping his Jack Daniels, staring at the empty seat, lost in conversations that only he could hear. Sometimes fans would approach. They always did, even in his 80s. Frank Sinatra couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. "Excuse me, Mr. Sinatra. I'm so sorry to bother you. Could I get an autograph?" Frank would look up, confused for a moment. Who was this person? Why were they interrupting his dinner with Ava? Then training would kick in. 40 years of being gracious to fans. "Sure, pal. You got a pen?" He'd sign the napkin or the menu. His signature shaky now, not the bold, swooping autograph of his youth, but still legible. Still Frank Sinatra. "Thank you so much, Mr. Sinatra. You're a legend." Frank would give that famous smile, the one that had charmed millions. "Thanks. Enjoy your dinner." But the eyes were vacant. They were the eyes of a man who was just going through the motions, waiting for the check so he could go home and wait some more. On the drive home, Frank would stare out the window at the lights of Los Angeles, the city he'd conquered, the city that had given him everything and taken away the only thing he really wanted. At home, he'd change into pajamas, sit in his chair, the same chair he'd sat in for 40 years, and watch old movies, westerns mostly, John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart, simple stories where the good guy won and the girl stayed. Not like real life, not like Ava. His nurse would check on him around midnight. "Mr. Sinatra, you should get some sleep. In a minute, I just want to finish this." But he'd still be sitting there at 2 a.m., the movie long over, staring at the blank TV screen. The years crawled by like wounded animals. 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994. Frank's health deteriorated steadily, inevitably. More strokes, each one taking a little more of him. His memory, once sharp as a blade, started to rust and fail. He would forget where he was. "Where's my dressing room? I have a show tonight." "Dad, you're at home. You don't have a show." Confusion. Fear. "What do you mean I don't have a show? People are waiting." "Dad, you retired, remember?" And slowly, painfully, Frank would remember. "Oh, right, yeah." But he never forgot Ava. Even when he forgot his own children's names, even when he forgot what year it was, he never forgot her. Nancy visited every week. "Hi, Dad, how are you feeling?" Frank would look at her with confusion, struggling to place the face, then recognition. "Nancy, my Nancy." "That's right, Dad." They'd sit together, sometimes in silence, sometimes with Frank drifting through decades in his mind. "Is Ava here? I thought she was coming for dinner." Nancy's heart would break. "No, Dad, Ava's gone. She died, remember?" And the pain would hit him again, fresh and raw as the day she died, as if he were learning it for the first time. "Oh," his face would crumble. "Oh, that's right. She's gone." Then he'd go quiet, lost somewhere Nancy couldn't follow. Sometimes he'd come back with stories. "Did I ever tell you about the time in Havana? 1957. Ava and I had this fight at the National Hotel. She threw a champagne bottle at my head. Missed. Barely." He'd chuckle. "She had terrible aim." Nancy would smile. "You've told me, Dad." "Have I? Well, it's a good story. In 1995, Dean Martin died died. Frank was too weak to attend the funeral. When Nancy told him, Frank just nodded. Dean's gone? Yes, Dad. And Sammy? He's gone too, right? Yes. Sammy died in 1990. And Ava? Yes, Dad. Ava too. Frank's eyes filled with tears. I'm the last one left. Everyone's gone. I'm just waiting for my turn. Don't say that, Dad. Why not? It's the truth. What am I still doing here? Everyone I love is already gone. Nancy couldn't argue, because he was right. By 1997, Frank was barely a shadow of himself. He couldn't walk without help, couldn't remember conversations from 5 minutes ago, couldn't sing anymore. His voice, the voice that had defined an era, was gone. But sometimes, in moments of clarity, he would ask his nurse to play his old records. I'm a fool to want you would fill the room, and Frank would close his eyes and mouth the words, and he would cry, silently, tears running down his weathered face. His assistant once found him holding a photograph of Ava from 1951, just holding it, staring at it. Mr. Sinatra, can I get you anything? Frank didn't look up. Can you bring her back? I'm sorry, sir, I can't do that. Then no, you can't get me anything. May 14th, 1998, a Thursday. The weather in Los Angeles was clear and warm. Frank Sinatra lay in his bed. His breathing was shallow. The heart attacks, the strokes, the dementia. His body was shutting down. Barbara was there. Nancy was there. Frank Jr. and Tina were there. The whole family gathered around, knowing the end was near. Frank drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, he opened his eyes and looked around the room, confused. Where am I? You're home, Dad. You're safe. He nodded. Then very quietly, is Ava here? Nancy took his hand. Not yet, Dad, but she's waiting for you. Frank smiled. Actually smiled. The first real smile anyone had seen in years. Good. I've been waiting for her too. Those were the last words Frank Sinatra ever spoke. He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. And at 10:50 p.m., surrounded by family but alone in the only way that mattered, Frank Sinatra took his last breath. The chairman of the board, the voice, the legend. He was 82 years old. When the news broke, the world mourned. Tributes poured in from presidents, celebrities, fans. The lights on the Las Vegas Strip were dimmed. Radio stations played his music non-stop. But for those who really knew Frank, there was a sense of relief. He wasn't suffering anymore. He wasn't waiting anymore. And somewhere, wherever Ava was, he'd finally found her again. The tragic irony of Frank Sinatra's life is that he had everything: fame, money, talent, respect. He was one of the biggest stars in the history of entertainment. But the only thing he ever really wanted, he couldn't keep. Ava Gardner, the woman who owned his heart from 1949 until the day he died. He loved her so much that he couldn't survive without her. Not really. He lived 8 more years after she died, but he wasn't living. He was just existing, going through the motions, waiting for his turn, and that, in its own heartbreaking way, is the most noble legacy of all. Because Frank Sinatra taught us that fame is nothing, money is dust, awards are just metal. The only thing that truly matters is love, and he loved Ava Gardner with an intensity that most people will never experience. He loved her when she was there, he loved her when she left, he loved her when she was dying, and he loved her after she was gone. For 8 years he loved a ghost, and then he became one himself. So the next time you hear One for My Baby, don't just hear the smooth voice and the jazzy piano. Listen to the pain, listen to the longing. That's Frank Sinatra, sitting at a bar at 2 a.m. drinking alone, thinking about the woman who got away and never came back. That's Frank Sinatra, sitting in an empty chair at dinner, waiting for someone who would never sit down. That's Frank Sinatra, dying slowly for 8 years until he could finally be with her again. Rest in peace, Frank. You finally got your girl back.